My name is Elena Hart. I'm 35 years old. And this is the story of how I lost everything in a single email and built something even stronger from the ashes. It was a Thursday morning. Gray clouds rolled over Denver's skyline, a sharp wind biting at my coat as I pushed through the revolving glass doors of Marlowe Freight Systems. I had worked there for nearly 8 years, longer than some marriages last, and I believed, maybe foolishly, that loyalty meant something. 3 days earlier, I buried my father. He slipped on black ice outside his home, a fall so sudden, so random that even now it didn't feel real. I could still hear the hospital's sterile voice crackling through my phone. "I'm sorry, Ms. Hart, but your father didn't make it." I had been in a quarterly review meeting when that call came. Without thinking twice, I stood up, excused myself, and requested 3 days bereavement leave. HR said it was fine. My direct boss, Carl Wexler, even muttered, "Family first, Elena," barely lifting his eyes from his laptop. I thought that was the end of it. But that morning when I logged into my computer, the first thing I saw wasn't a backlog of emails or a welcome back message. It was a cold, clinical subject line blinking at the top of my inbox. Notice of termination, effective immediately. I clicked, my hands trembling. The body of the email was even worse. "Elena, your absence during a critical operational phase has been deemed a breach of performance expectations. Please clear your desk and exit the premises by 5 p.m. No sympathy. No meeting. No explanation. 8 years of building teams, closing multimillion-dollar logistics contracts, mentoring interns, wiped out by a single paragraph. I sat frozen. Around me, the office buzzed as if the world hadn't just cracked open under my feet. I reread the email, hoping, praying it was some twisted mistake. But it wasn't. Attached was a file listing dereliction of duty as the cause. My bereavement leave, the same one they approved, now counted as negligence. Carl Wexler avoided eye contact as he strolled past my desk. A tight, guilty line pressed across his lips. Coward. My heart pounded in my chest, not from sadness. No, sadness would come later, but from something sharper. Betrayal. I stood, grabbed a cardboard box from under my desk, and began silently packing. My framed photo of Dad and me at the Grand Canyon. The tiny succulent my team gave me last Christmas. My lucky blue pen. Each item felt heavier than the last. By the time my coworkers realized what was happening, a suffocating tension filled the air. "Elena," Liz from compliance whispered. What's going on?" I forced a smile that almost broke my face. Apparently, attending my father's funeral made me a liability. Murmurs erupted. Ryan from data analysis stormed off toward HR. Julia, who once cried on my shoulder after a bad performance review, looked like she might cry again. No one could believe it. And then Carl appeared, hands shoved in his pockets, standing awkwardly a few feet away. "Elena, let's not make this harder than it needs to be," he muttered. Harder. My mouth opened but no words came. What was there to say? That loyalty was a lie. That they had traded 8 years of service for the convenience of a scapegoat. Instead, I simply nodded. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. As I carried my box to the elevator, I could feel their eyes burning into my back. Some guilty, some horrified, some just sad. No one stopped me. No one stopped Carl. That was the moment I understood. Sometimes injustice doesn't roar. It whispers and lets you walk away without a fight. The doors slid shut. The elevator hummed. And just like that, I was no longer Elena Hart, Senior Logistics Manager. I was just Elena. The cold Denver air hit my face like a slap when I stepped outside. I loaded the box into my car, slid into the driver's seat, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. I could have screamed. I could have cried. But all I did was sit there, numb, as if my whole body had turned to stone. My phone buzzed. A message from Logan, my closest teammate. "Elena, this is Bulls **T. None of us agree with it. We'll talk tonight." I didn't reply. What was there to say? The company I poured my soul into tossed me out like trash. They didn't deserve another second of my pain. But deep inside, a seed of something else stirred. It wasn't rage. It wasn't despair. It was resolve. Because if they thought they'd broken me, they had no idea who I really was. That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, the box from my desk shoved into a corner like a wound I didn't want to look at. The city lights outside blurred into a watery mess against my window. I tried making tea, but it went cold in my hands. I tried turning on the TV, but the noise felt unbearable. Instead, I just sat there in the quiet, staring into nothing, feeling every second stretch out like a road with no end. I didn't know what to do next. The logical part of me said, update your resume, start applying, move on. But another part, the part that remembered every late night, every team success, every promise Carl and the executives made, wanted to curl up and disappear. Just when the silence started pressing too hard on my chest, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Logan. We're at Maggie's. You should come. Maggie's was the small, cozy pub 2 blocks from the office where we used to celebrate project wins. It was the kind of place where the bartender knew your name and your drink. For a moment I hesitated. What if they pitied me? What if they just wanted gossip? But then I thought, no. These people were my real team, not Marlowe Freight. I grabbed my coat and went. When I pushed open the door to Maggie's, a burst of warmth and the smell of frying onions hit me. The pub was half full, but I spotted them immediately. Logan, Julia, Ryan, and a few others sat around a table in the back. When they saw me, they didn't wave or call out. They just stood up, as if they couldn't sit still knowing I had walked in. Logan pulled out a chair for me. You're late, he teased, but his voice cracked a little. I managed a small smile and sat down. For a while no one talked about it. We just ordered food, joked about office disasters, laughed about Logan's awful fantasy football record. But the elephant in the room grew heavier with every passing minute until finally Ryan set down his beer and said, "They screwed you, Elena." The table fell silent. "They made a mistake," Julia said fiercely. "A huge one." I shrugged, the anger still too fresh to trust my own voice. "You were the reason the Crosswind contract even happened," Logan added. "You were the one who stayed after hours training the new hires when Carl couldn't be bothered." "They used you," Ryan said, his voice low and rough. "And now the whole company's cracking. You didn't hear this from me, but 3 clients already put contracts on hold." And blinked. That fast. "Elena," Julia leaned closer, her eyes burning. "They're going to realize what they lost. But you," she smiled, fierce and proud. "You're gonna build something they can never touch." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But I felt so small, so gutted, like a tree cut down at the root. Still I nodded, smiled back. And for the first time all day, I felt something loosen inside me. Oh. That night, lying awake in bed, I thought about everything my father used to say. When someone closes a door in your face, build your own house. Maybe I didn't need to fight for a seat at their table anymore. Maybe it was time to build my own. The next morning I opened my laptop. I pulled up an old folder labeled Someday Ideas, the one I'd started back when dreams still felt possible. Inside were dusty outlines for a logistics consulting firm, notes on what frustrated clients most about big companies like Marlowe Freight: poor communication, inflexibility, lack of real support. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked through the files. What if this was my shot? It was terrifying. It was insane. I didn't have funding. I didn't have a perfect business plan. But I had something they didn't. Experience, heart, and the trust of people who mattered. By noon, I had already emailed a few former contacts, people I met at conferences, people who had once said, "If you ever go solo, let us know." I wasn't even asking for contracts yet. Just planting seeds, seeing if anyone remembered me. To my shock, by 4 p.m. I had 3 replies. "Let's talk. I'm interested. Call me next week." It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't a paycheck. But it was enough. Enough to know I wasn't invisible. Enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could build something no email could destroy. The days that followed were a blur. I filed the LLC paperwork, designed a rough logo in Canva at 2 a.m., bought a second-hand desk off Facebook Marketplace. Every tiny step felt like scaling Everest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, because this wasn't just about work anymore. It was about proving that they couldn't erase me. Late one night, sitting on my floor surrounded by scattered business cards and half-drunk coffee, I got a text that almost made me drop my phone. It was from Marcus Vance, the regional director for Trident Global Shipping, a company that Marlowe Freight had been desperate to sign for 2 years. Heard what happened? Can we meet? My heart stuttered. Marcus Vance wasn't just any potential client. He was the white whale. The kind of account that could launch a small firm from survival to success overnight. I stared at the screen, stunned. And then, without hesitation, I replied, "Absolutely. Name the time and place." As I set the phone down, a slow, unstoppable smile spread across my face. They had thrown me out like garbage. But they forgot one thing. You can't destroy someone who refuses to stay broken. Marcus Vance suggested we meet at a little bistro downtown, one of those sleek places with Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling and waiters dressed in black. I barely slept the night before. My mind kept spinning with what if he was just being polite? What if he only wanted gossip about Marlowe Freight's implosion? But deep down, a stronger voice, the one that had carried me through the worst days, whispered, "You deserve this chance. Walk in like you own it." I ironed my best blazer, the one I used to save for big client presentations, and arrived 5 minutes early. When Marcus entered, tall and sharp-eyed, he immediately spotted me and smiled warmly. Not politely, genuinely. That alone steadied my heart. "Elena," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Good to see you. Though, I wish it were under better circumstances." "Maybe it's better than you think," I replied with a small smile. And for the first time in weeks I believed it. We ordered coffee, and he wasted no time. "I'll be blunt," he said, leaning forward. "We've been reconsidering our logistics partnerships. Marlowe's internal shakeups have spooked a lot of companies. And frankly, even before the chaos, you were the only reason we kept talking to them." I swallowed, my throat tightening. He went on. "I heard you're starting something new. Independent. Is that true?" He nodded. "Early stages. Very early. Just me right now. No office. No staff. Just experience, relationships, and a plan to do it right." Marcus smiled slightly, tapping his fingers on the table. "Sometimes that's exactly what companies need. Someone who gives a damn." He slid a slim folder across the table. "Here's a preliminary RFP. We're looking for boutique firms that can offer real-time route flexibility, personalized account management, and hands-on oversight. Things the big names promise but rarely deliver." I opened the folder with trembling hands. It was real. This wasn't sympathy. This was an opportunity. Huge one. "If you think you can handle it," Marcus said, his eyes sharp but not unkind, "submit your proposal in 2 weeks. Win or lose, it's yours to shoot for." I closed the folder, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure the whole restaurant could hear it. "I won't let you down," I said. When I stepped back into the cold Denver air, the wind cut through my coat, but it didn't matter. I walked taller, faster, stronger, 'cause now it was real. I raced home, spread the RFP documents across my tiny kitchen table, and got to work. The proposal had to be perfect, clear, compelling, undeniably me. I didn't have a fancy marketing department or a glossy brochure. I had long nights, gallons of coffee, and sheer, stubborn determination. For 2 weeks, I lived and breathed that proposal. Fine-tuning route optimization models, drafting contingency plans, creating realistic, scalable structures for client onboarding and crisis management. Some nights, doubt gnawed at me. I was just one person. I didn't have a huge staff or endless resources. But then I remembered something my father used to say. You don't need a big army to win. You need the right strategy, and the will to keep going when others quit. I wasn't the biggest player, but I was going to be the smartest. The night before the submission deadline, I triple-checked every line, every figure, every contingency plan. I clicked send with a shaking hand and immediately collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but buzzing. It was out of my hands now. 2 days later I got a call. Marcus. I barely got out a hello before he said, "We want you, Elena. Trident Global wants to be your first official client." I couldn't speak. My throat closed up with shock, then opened in a burst of raw, unfiltered joy. "Subject to final negotiations, of course," he added with a chuckle. "But our team unanimously agreed. Your proposal showed more attention to detail and more understanding of our needs than the last 3 firms combined." Tears pricked my eyes. I squeezed them shut, letting his words sink into the deepest wounds that Marlowe Freight had left behind. I wasn't broken. I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. We finalized the contract within a week. It wasn't a giant account yet, but it was stable, profitable, and prestigious. A beacon that told the industry, Elena Hart is here. And she's not playing small. With the signed contract in hand, I filed for my business bank account. Bought a second monitor for my kitchen table turn desk. Started designing a real website. And word traveled faster than wildfire. First a small manufacturing company called West Point Tools reached out. Then a packaging supplier. Then a specialty foods distributor. Each new call, each new inquiry, felt like one more brick in the foundation of something unshakable. But with success came whispers too. I heard through the grapevine that Marlowe Freight was panicking. Carl was scrambling to stabilize accounts. Some clients had frozen renewals. Others, including Trident Global, had outright left. And I, someone they discarded without a second thought, was quietly becoming a threat they couldn't afford to ignore. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was building something bigger than revenge could ever offer. Something they could never take from me again. And deep down I knew. This was only the beginning. It was a Friday afternoon when the next surprise hit. I was finalizing a logistics blueprint for West Point Tools when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I let unknown numbers go to voicemail. But something nudged me to pick up. "Hello, this is Elena," I answered cautiously. There was a pause, and then a voice I hadn't heard in months. A voice that triggered every instinct to hang up, spoke. "Elena, it's Carl Wexler." I stood there, frozen, my pen slipping from my hand and clattering onto the table. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from," he continued. His voice unusually tight, almost, what was that? Nervous. I didn't say anything. I wanted to hear whatever train wreck was coming next. "I'm reaching out because we're facing some challenges. With the recent departures, some key clients have, expressed dissatisfaction. And there's talk about, well, restructuring leadership." I pressed the phone closer to my ear. I wanted to hear every syllable of this downfall. "We'd like to offer you a consulting contract," Carl rushed on, as if speed would soften the absurdity. "High compensation, of course. Help us stabilize the transition. Your insight would be invaluable." For a moment the temptation flared. To march back in, to demand triple what they offered, to watch Carl squirm. But then, almost immediately, the truth settled heavy and clear in my chest. I didn't owe them anything. Not explanations. Not labor. Not redemption. They made their choice the day they locked me out with an email. "I'm not interested," I said, my voice calm, clean and final. Carl sputtered. "Elena, please just think about." "I have thought about it," I said, cutting him off. "Every night I spent rebuilding from the rubble you left me in. Every night I wondered if maybe I deserved what happened. But now I know I didn't. I earned better. And I found it without you." He went silent. I could almost hear the crumbling on the other side of the line. "I wish you luck," I finished, meaning none of it. "You're going to need it." And I hung up. I sat there for a few minutes, the silence buzzing louder than any words. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of standing up for myself in a way I never had before. The power of walking away, truly walking away, filled me with a high so pure it almost made me laugh. Later that evening, I met Logan and Julia at a new co-working space downtown. I had just rented a tiny private office, barely bigger than a closet, but it was mine. We sat on the floor, eating greasy takeout and brainstorming names for the firm. "What about Heartline Logistics?" Julia suggested, mouth half full of lo mein. I laughed. "Sounds like an airline." "Maybe that's good," Logan said, grinning. "You're flying higher than them now." I rolled my eyes but secretly loved it. We kept throwing out names, some serious, some ridiculous, until finally Logan leaned back, tossing a fortune cookie into the air and catching it. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "your dad used to say you were the toughest person he knew. Like a stone in the river. Current couldn't knock you down." I blinked. The memory hit so hard it stole my breath for a second. "Stone River Logistics," I said softly. Both of them looked at me. And they nodded. That night, Stone River Logistics was born. Started small. Just me and a handful of contracts. But each day the momentum grew. West Point expanded their deal. Trident Global referred me to 2 sister companies. I hired a part-time assistant, a brilliant young woman named Serena who reminded me a little of myself 10 years ago. Every small win felt monumental. Every failure felt survivable. And every time I passed the old Marlowe Freight building on the drive downtown, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt triumph. Not the flashy, scream it from the rooftops kind. The quiet, unshakable kind. The kind you carry in your chest like a flame no storm can snuff out. 3 months after Stone River officially launched, I received an invitation that made my heart jump. The annual Denver Supply Chain Leadership Conference. It was the same event where Marlowe Freight used to parade me around like a trophy, shoving me into every photo op. Now they wanted Stone River Logistics to participate on a panel about resilient growth in disrupted markets. I stared at the invitation, half laughing, half stunned. They didn't even realize it was me. Least not yet. Accepted. And this time I wasn't going as someone's employee. I was going as the builder of something they could never tear down. The morning of the conference, I pulled on my navy blue blazer, the same one I wore the day Marlowe Freight fired me, and smiled at my reflection. I didn't see the woman who had walked out carrying a box of memories and humiliation. I saw someone stronger. Someone who had weathered the storm and built her own ship. The conference center buzzed with energy. Banners hung from the vaulted ceilings, and polished professionals mingled over coffee, flashing business cards and perfect smiles. I moved through the crowd quietly, anonymously. Just another face. Now. I found my seat on the panel next to executives from companies far bigger than mine. Global chains, massive shippers, household names. And there I was. Stone River Logistics. A name barely 6 months old. When the moderator introduced me, there was a slight murmur in the crowd. Some people recognized my name. Some tilted their heads, trying to remember. And then I spoke. I didn't use jargon. I didn't bury them in numbers. I told the truth. About the power of valuing people over profits. About how real loyalty isn't bought with bonuses. It's earned by showing up when it matters most. About how being forced out had been the best thing that ever happened to me because it pushed me to create a company where no one was disposable. As I spoke, something shifted. People leaned in. They nodded. They saw me, not as a victim but as a force. Afterward, a line formed by the stage. Executives, managers, entrepreneurs, all wanting to shake my hand, ask for my card, learn about Stone River. And at the very back of the room, standing stiffly in a cheap-looking suit, was Carl Wexler. Our eyes met across the crowd. He looked older, smaller. Like the power he once wielded had crumbled in his hands, and he didn't know how to rebuild. I gave him a polite nod, nothing more. He didn't approach. He couldn't. That was the true victory. Not crushing him. Not humiliating him. But standing in a place he could never reach again. Later that week, the ripple effects began. 3 companies who had once been loyal to Marlowe Freight reached out to Stone River. One cited recent leadership concerns. Another simply said, We want someone we can trust. By the end of the month, Stone River had doubled its client roster. Serena, my assistant, couldn't stop smiling as she updated the CRM system. "This is insane," she said, laughing. "We're going to need a bigger office." I laughed with her, the sound light and free in a way I hadn't felt in years. We leased a small, sunlit space downtown, nothing fancy but full of possibility. I painted one wall myself, a deep, steady blue, the color of the river stones my father used to skip across the water when I was a little girl. On the first day we moved in, Logan and Julia showed up with a bottle of sparkling cider and a cheap but heartfelt "Congratulations" banner. "You did it," Julia said, hugging me tightly. "You really, really did it." Smiled. "No, we did it. Because I hadn't gotten here alone. Every person who believed in me, every hand that reached out when I was drowning, every word of encouragement, they were woven into every brick, every desk, every file folder in that office. Stone River wasn't just a company. It was proof that even after betrayal, even after being cast aside like trash, you could rise. And not just rise, you could soar. One crisp Saturday morning, as the first snowfall of the season dusted the city in white, I visited my father's grave. I brought two things: a simple bouquet of wildflowers and a small, smooth stone I had picked from the river near his old cabin. I knelt down, brushing the snow off the plaque. "Hey, Dad," I said softly. I kept going. "Just like you taught me." I placed the stone carefully at the base of the marker. Silent promise. Piece of my journey. As I stood up, the cold bit into my skin, but I barely felt it. Because in that moment, standing there under the gray sky, I wasn't mourning anymore. I was honoring. And I knew, deep in my bones, that he would be proud. The past didn't own me. The betrayal didn't define me. I had taken the broken pieces they left behind and built a bridge strong enough to carry me somewhere they could never follow. Somewhere I belonged. Somewhere called home. A few weeks later, the snow thickened over Denver, turning the city into a postcard of white streets and twinkling lights. Stone River's little office buzzed with energy. New contracts coming in, client meetings lined up back to back, our tiny team working late but laughing often. The cold no longer bit like it used to. Somehow, everything inside me stayed warm. One late evening, as I finalized a new onboarding packet for a client in Seattle, Serena poked her head into my office. "Hey, Elena," she said, an odd note in her voice. You should see this." I stood up and followed her into the break room, where Logan and Julia already had a laptop propped up. On the screen was a news alert from a major industry blog. Breaking. Marlowe Freight Systems acquired in emergency deal. Blinked stunned. The headline scrolled further. Due to massive client losses, internal upheaval, and failure to meet quarterly benchmarks, Marlowe Freight Systems has been acquired by Vanguard Logistics at a fire sale price. All executive leadership contracts terminated effective immediately. Logan gave a low whistle. Julia just shook her head. They collapsed faster than anyone thought. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. I sat down slowly, the weight of the moment settling into my chest. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't vengeance. It was something deeper, something quieter. Validation. Proof that when you build something on fear and exploitation, it will rot from the inside out. No matter how shiny the outside looks. "Guess Carl won't be calling again," Logan joked, breaking the tension. I smiled faintly. "No. I think he's finally realized the phone doesn't work both ways." Julia reached out, squeezing my hand gently. "You didn't have to destroy them, Elena. They destroyed themselves. You just walked away." And it was true. I hadn't posted angry rants online. I hadn't leaked damaging emails. I hadn't tried to take anyone down. I just left. I walked toward something better. And now, watching the final chapters of Marlowe Freight unfold from a distance, I knew I'd chosen the right road, the one my father would have respected. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of quiet victories. We signed 2 new contracts, doubling our revenue projection for the next quarter. Our reputation started to spread. Stone River wasn't the biggest, but we were the most trusted. Clients called us because they knew we would answer. We even got invited to bid on a regional government project, a massive opportunity that could put Stone River into a whole new league. As I sat reviewing the bid documents late one night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Barbara Hayes. I hadn't heard from her in years. She had been one of the senior HR managers at Marlowe Freight before she left quietly 2 years ago. Back then, she was one of the few who had sent me a private goodbye note, full of words she probably wasn't allowed to say publicly. Her message now was simple. Heard about Stone River. Saw your panel at the conference. Just wanted to say you inspire more people than you realize. We're proud of you. Tears stung my eyes. Not because of sadness, but because of how far I had come from that cold morning when I carried my box out the glass doors, feeling invisible. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was undeniable. And Stone River wasn't just surviving. It was blooming. One crisp Friday afternoon, after locking in our largest client to date, I called a team meeting. Everyone gathered in the break room. Serena, Logan, Julia, a few new hires. I looked around at their faces, eager, determined, full of dreams, and I realized something profound. We weren't just a company. We were a second chance. Safe harbor. A living, breathing answer to everyone who ever asked, can business be done differently? Can people matter more than profits? The answer was standing right here in front of me. I cleared my throat, my voice thick with emotion. I just want to say thank you, I said. Not for the work, not just for the work, but for believing this could be real, for choosing trust over fear, for showing up day after day with your whole hearts. Logan lifted his soda can. To Stone River, he said. Built on what matters. To Stone River, everyone echoed. And we clinked our cups together. No champagne, no confetti, just pure, honest triumph. Later that night, as I walked to my car under the falling snow, I looked up at the sky. The city lights blurred into a soft halo above me. I thought about my father. About that tiny succulent I had left behind at Marlowe Freight, the one I had found months later, still alive, still stubbornly growing. Just like me. I whispered into the quiet winter night. I made it, Dad. I really made it. And I knew beyond any doubt that he was smiling somewhere. That I hadn't just survived. I had flourished. Spring came early to Denver that year. The snow melted into fast-running streams. The sidewalks warmed under the rising sun, and Stone River blossomed alongside the city. We landed the regional government contract. Not because we were the cheapest bidder, but because we were the most trusted. Our references weren't just satisfied. They were fiercely loyal. And loyalty, real loyalty, is priceless. I stood in our new office one afternoon. Sunlight spilling through the big glass windows onto the polished concrete floors. We had outgrown our old space. Now we had 2 full floors, a proper reception desk, a glass-walled conference room, and a wall where every employee could hang a framed photo of the person who had believed in them the most. Parents, grandparents, mentors, even an old coach. On my own spot, I placed a photo of my father, standing at the edge of the Clearwater River, holding a fishing rod and grinning into the sun. Underneath, a small brass plaque read, "Build, not revenge." One afternoon, I was preparing for a leadership meeting when Serena burst into my office, breathless. "You're not going to believe this," she said, holding up her phone. Industry Today just released their annual Top 25 Logistics Innovators list. I blinked. Okay. She flipped the screen around. There at number 6, above companies I used to dream of working for, was Stone River Logistics. I stared at it, barely breathing. A tiny company born out of Betrayal, now standing shoulder to shoulder with industry giants. It didn't feel real, but it was. Logan and Julia came running in, whooping and laughing like kids. Serena jumped up and down, almost knocking over her coffee. And me. I just stood there for a second, the noise fading into a soft hum. 'Cause I realized something. This wasn't the final chapter. It was only the beginning. Later that evening, after the celebrations died down and the office grew quiet, I sat at my desk alone. I opened an email that had been sitting in my inbox all day. It was from a junior associate at Vanguard Logistics, the company that had swallowed up the carcass of Marlowe Freight. The email was polite, even deferential. They wanted to know if Stone River would consider consulting for them, helping them rebuild the Western Regional Network, helping them recover from the wreckage Marlowe had left behind. I smiled, not cruelly, not mockingly. Just a small, bittersweet smile. 'Cause life has a way of circling back around. I didn't reply immediately. I leaned back in my chair, looking out over the city. The same streets where I once walked with a cardboard box in my arms and a hollow ache in my chest. The same city that had watched me fall and rise again. Finally, I typed a short, simple reply. Thank you for your inquiry. At this time, Stone River is focused on growing our current client base and internal teams. Wishing you the best in your rebuilding process. And I hit send. No anger. No revenge. Just peace. The real kind. The kind that comes not from tearing others down, but from building something so strong, so undeniable, that no one could ever take it away. Weeks later, at our annual team retreat in the foothills outside the city, I stood on the lodge balcony as the sun dipped below the mountains. The team laughed around a bonfire below. Stories and marshmallows and music filling the cool night air. I clutched the little river stone I kept in my pocket, the one I had picked up that day at Clearwater. And I whispered a quiet promise to the wind. I'll never forget what it felt like to be left behind. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure no one else feels that way. Not if I can help it. Because that's the real revenge. Not bitterness. Not anger. But kindness. Kindness when it's least expected. Kindness when it's least deserved. Kindness that outlives the people who tried to break you. Today, Stone River Logistics isn't just a company. It's a family. Force. A living, breathing reminder that no matter how deeply you fall, you can rise again. Stronger, kinder, and more unstoppable than ever. And me. I'm no longer the woman who lost her job. I'm the woman who built an empire out of the pieces they tried to bury. I'm Elena Hart. And I wouldn't change a single part of my story. Not even the painful ones. Because every crack, every scar, every slammed door led me here. Led me home. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising so far beyond the reach of those who wronged you that their betrayal becomes just a faded memory. As Elena's journey shows us, real power isn't about destruction. It's about construction. About choosing to build when others expect you to break. When someone closes a door, don't waste your energy pounding on it. Build your own house instead. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you believe in second chances again, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. Share your thoughts below. Would you have forgiven Marlowe Freight? Or would you have walked away too, like Elena?